Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here today. We're going to talk about another way that we can make government more effective, more efficient, and more customer focused, and help create opportunities to create jobs here in Nebraska. And specifically, we're going to be talking about occupational licensing reform. I'm joined here by a number of senators who are going to be helping with this initiative. We've got Senator Ricketts, Senator Geis, Senator Albright, Senator Lindstrom, Senator Lowe, Senator Erdman. Okay, we got all of them. We're also being joined by the Platt Institute's Director of Governmental Affairs, who's also a former senator, Nicole Fox. And then we've got a variety of folks who are involved in different industries that are going to be talking a little bit today as well. So we've got Tina Vest, who is a nurse practitioner. We've got Ilona Holland, who is a massage therapist. We've got Dr. Josh Severe, who is an audiologist. We've got Michael Hagan, who is a former Guard reservist and also working to become a barber. We've got Mickey Anderson, who's a car salesman. So they'll all be talking a little bit about their professions and what this means. And the idea here is that we are looking at what are the barriers that we put up in front of job creators or people who are looking to make changes in their careers or seeking upward mobility. What are the occupational licenses that we put in place that are a barrier to that? So, for example, last year, Senator Fox passed a bill with regard to hair braiding. We required 2,100-hour cosmetology degree for hair braiding. Now, maybe I just don't understand hair braiding. That's a joke. Yeah, okay, thanks. I should have told you all to chuckle at that one, didn't I? But that's an opportunity for us to be able to remove a barrier to allow people to create their own jobs. That you don't need to have that much of a cosmetology degree to do hair braiding. And that's what we're looking at here too, is we're looking at occupational licenses where Nebraska has either requirements that are out of step with what other states do or are overly onerous. And this is important because the Institute for Justice did a survey that looked at different occupational licenses. And in Nebraska, about 25% of the people that are employed here have a requirement for an occupational license. And what the Institute for Justice found is that it tends to target lower income professions and professions that help people be upwardly mobile. And of the 102 professions that the Institute of Justice looked at, Nebraska had license requirements for 45 of those. So our concern is that we're putting up barriers for people to change their careers, to be upwardly mobile, and we want to take that out. For example, we don't necessarily need to have a license to ship potatoes. That's one of the ones we're going to look at. Why do we have a requirement for bus drivers, school bus drivers, to get an additional permit on top of their CDL, the commercial driver's license, that they already have to have, that requires that they're required to have, that also allows them to be able to carry passengers? Again, that's duplicative. So we want to look for areas where we're duplicating, where it doesn't make sense, and get rid of those requirements so that we can create more opportunities. And that's what really this is about. So we will have 8 different bills that are targeting 20 different licenses or establishments to be able to help free up the economy, be able to create more opportunity, and help Nebraskans create jobs. Oh, Joanne, okay, Joanne just joined. I'm going to have to start the whole thing over now. Well, the good news is you missed my entire first speech. We're just getting into the good speakers who are going to start talking about it now. So with that, I'd like to introduce Senator Merv Ricketts, who is going to talk about some of the things that he's going to be doing, and then we'll roll on to some of the senators and some of the other speakers that we have here. So with that, Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Governor. I'm excited to be part of this effort, and I also want to express my appreciation for Governor Ricketts for the energy that he has brought to this and to the leadership that he's bringing to this reform effort of regulations to lower the burden that we place on Nebraskans who want to help us grow our state economy. As some examples, in their requirement for training for licensed cosmetologists is 2,100 in the state of Nebraska. In Kansas, Missouri, it's 1,500, which shows how we are out of step. Also, we require 1,000 hours for training of massage therapists, whereas Colorado, Missouri, and South Dakota require 500. So I'm not quite sure how we got there, but we are there, and we are prepared to take a look at it. Our intent is to streamline applications as well for the occupations, including, and this comes back to the Health and Human Services Committee, and nurses and mental health practitioners, and to promote reciprocity with licensed individuals moving into Nebraska. We are committed to making Nebraska even more business-friendly and entrepreneurial. That concludes my remarks, and I'm now going to ask Senator Lowe to make some comments. Let it go.
Thank you, Senator Reapy, and Governor, thank you very much for this opportunity. While I was in college, I sold cars to help with income. Also talking with Senator Albright, she did the same thing, only for a longer period of time. We had to buy a salesman's license to sell cars. It seems a little bit redundant when the dealer already had a license. And I just don't believe it's necessary for the salesman to carry a license, and it's a good one just to go away. Senator Director Fox, I'll give this one to you.
Good morning. I'm former State Senator Nicole Fox, and I currently serve as Director of Government Relations at the Platt Institute for Economic Research. It's an honor to join Governor Ricketts and our fellow state senators here, as well as our heroes, to discuss occupational licensing reform as a priority for the 2017 legislative session. And I would like to thank their support, because this is a very important initiative as a means to grow Nebraska's economy. Just like Senator Lowe, I too was affected by burdensome occupational licensing regulations. In 1997, I was looking to move to Omaha to work and live. Unfortunately, experience requirements for licensure for my chosen profession required me to wait at least 6 to 8 months, possibly more, and before I could be eligible to apply for a license to work as a medical nutrition therapist. Because of this, I moved to eastern Iowa to live, to work, and to pay for goods and services. 2 years later, I was able to accept a job in Omaha as I met the needed requirements for licensure to practice in my profession. During the 2016 session, I sponsored Nebraska's first occupational license reform bill, LB 898, also known as the hair braiding bill. During my time in the legislature, I represented one of the poorest districts in the state. I saw this as an opportunity to create jobs and promote entrepreneurship. This bill exempted natural hair braiders from having to pursue a cosmetology degree in order to obtain a professional license to braid hair, an art that's been around for centuries. A cosmetology curriculum gives little, if any, natural hair braiding instruction at a cost of over 2,000 practice hours and $20,000 in tuition. Occupational licensing laws were initially created as a means of protecting the public from negligent and unqualified practitioners. But more and more, instead of protecting the public from harm, we're seeing interest groups create monopolies which are limiting competition and making it difficult for new workers to enter the workforce and for entrepreneurs from starting small businesses. Nebraska faces a workforce shortage, and occupational licensing creates a significant labor force issue. There are nearly 200 different occupations in Nebraska that require a government license, affecting nearly 1 in 4 workers and negatively impacting small businesses trying to hire employees. For some individuals and families, the fees for licensing and the cost of tuition to meet educational requirements associated with occupational licensing create significant financial barriers. Licensing also poses a financial barrier to small businesses, and often the cost is passed on to consumers by raising the price of goods and services. A study by the Heritage Foundation showed that occupational licensing reform could save Nebraska households over $900 annually. Occupational licensing reform will make Nebraska's job licensing requirements more consistent and more competitive with our neighboring states, so that we can keep individuals from leaving our state in search of work elsewhere. Occupational licensing reform will also provide greater reciprocity for workers wanting to move to Nebraska who already hold licenses in good standing in other states. And finally, we see occupational licensing reform as a way to cultivate an environment where new businesses are being created and therefore hardworking Nebraskans can find the jobs needed to live the good life. At this time, I would like to allow some of the heroes that we've invited today to introduce themselves and share their stories of how occupational licensing has created a barrier either to work in our state, start a business, or hire workers to grow their business.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Alona Holland, licensed massage therapist in the state of Iowa, where I also run my own business there. Having moved to Nebraska in 2013, I found out that I wasn't able to begin practicing because I needed another 400 hours. And it gave me the courage to go forward, but there were obstacles along the way. And seeing that my career, started in '98, and I have 2 decades of experience, educated in Europe, partly or mostly the United Kingdom, and moving to the U.S. and being told that those transcripts don't carry over, going back to school in the U.S. for 600 hours, then coming to set up our base and grow our family here in Nebraska, being told I need another 400 hours on top of that. Financially, we couldn't do it, and the obstacles I encountered to me were nonsensical. Didn't make sense, because if I have to get 400 hours, yet you're allowing me to work in Nebraska just till I get those 400 hours, then I don't see where I'm protecting the consumer. It just didn't make sense. So I decided to go over to Iowa, where it was a straightforward transfer from Nebraska. That's where I have my business now for 3 years. And the past 3 months, I've heard of many other therapists like myself that are working jobs they do not love, they're not passionate about, because of these obstacles or financial burdens that are, stopping them from pursuing their calling. So if not for myself, but for the rest of the therapists and car dealers and all these, occupations, I'm here to support this campaign. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to Michael.
Michael?
Michael?
Okay, Michael, step right up here.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. I have a twofold situation. My wife practiced massage therapy as a licensed massage therapist in Missouri for about 7 years, and then came to Nebraska and was encountered with every hurdle, basically, that you just heard, to get her massage therapy license in this state. Myself, I have a master's of business, and the business I wanted to choose to go into was to open a old-time barber shop, just like I as a child went to with my father. Nothing real spectacular, but just that bonding moment. And when I started looking at the requirements just for a barber to get their license, and started looking at the financial hurdle of not just the school itself, but at that time, I'd be out of work and putting the sole burden onto my wife. We had to kind of step back and put that to the side to reevaluate our future. So that's pretty much my story, where it's at, and I'll turn it over to Mickey Anderson.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be here tonight with the governor and the senators, and particularly with 2 former car salespeople. So that's. So I am with the Baxter Auto Group. We have 16 dealerships here in Nebraska, all of which are licensed. We employ several hundred car salespeople, and at this point or time, currently, they all need to be licensed as well. I can assure you that the thresholds that we employ for bringing people into our company are far higher than the threshold required by the licensing, and have made that at this point unnecessary and just extraneous. The fee for licensing a salesperson at this point has become really just a tax for employing a salesperson, and importantly, it doesn't provide any protection for the people of the state of Nebraska, and I think that's what's most important. I think it makes a lot of sense at this point to join 28 other states in eliminating this extra piece of bureaucracy that really has no value. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Josh Severe.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm an audiologist. I just moved here in August of this year from the state of Illinois, and Nebraska currently is one of only 18 states left in the U.S. that requires an additional licensure to dispense hearing aids for audiologists. Audiologist encompass a great deal of scope, including hearing aids and also cochlear implants, balance disorders. And currently, we're having to pay for an additional license every 2 years, also having to get additional CEUs, continuing education units, in order to obtain and maintain that license. And the added cost with the registration for conventions to go get these has added a financial burden to audiologists who just want to make the public hear better. The hospital that I work at in Omaha is widely known across the world for being able to provide this service to people, and I want to do anything that I can to help grow that, make it easier for us to practice. I just want to thank Senator/Director Nicole Fox for helping out with all of this process, and the governor for being open to occupational license reform. Appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Tina Vest.
Thank you very much. Hope you can see me. I'm a nurse practitioner in Lincoln, Nebraska. I've been in practice for almost 17 years. I own a private practice. We've already had successes thanks to the senators as well as Governor Ricketts as far as eliminating practice barriers with nurse practitioners. Since then, I've been able to expand my practice, offering services, expanding to Beatrice, hopefully to Kearney and across the state through telepsychiatry. I'm very excited to hear that there's additional efforts being made with barriers through behavioral mental health in eliminating redundancy. Doesn't necessarily eliminate training or education, and I want to emphasize that. That's a very key piece, but as far as licensure requirements, hours, and things like that, I think those are some very important issues to look at. It'll make a huge difference for me as a business owner in employing individuals in Nebraska as well as recruiting individuals to the state, which we so desperately need. With that, I have the pleasure of turning it over to Governor Ricketts.
Great. Thank you very much, and I want to thank everybody who's here, all of our heroes here. I mean, think about the stories we just heard. You know, for example, Tina, the barriers with regard to hiring people. And again, if we've got mental health professionals and substance abuse professionals, why do you need to have 2 licenses for that? Or Dr. Severe, he's a doctor, right? He's been trained in audiology, and yet we require an additional license on top of that. It just doesn't make sense. Car salesman, we talked about it there. That really doesn't provide any value to the state of Nebraska. Or the barriers we put up for people like Ilona when she wants to come here and start a business here and is told that, well, what you did in Iowa doesn't count in Nebraska, that there's more requirements here. And again, if it's not providing value, why are we creating barriers and asking people essentially to move across the border to Iowa to create jobs? That doesn't make us competitive. And let's see, who was the last person we needed to hit? Michael, of course, same deal. Same deal. He and his wife coming here, want to create jobs, want to create opportunities, and we put up obstacles in front of him, whether it's for his wife as a massage therapist or for him trying to get that barbershop going. And by the way, I know it's hard to believe, Michael, but I actually used to go to a barber. Ben's Barber on 60th Street in Omaha. It was just one of those old-time barbershops you talked about. Ben was a Navy veteran, had the tattoo on his forearm. So there was definitely a demand for that kind of thing. So anyway, not for me, though. Not now anymore. Okay, the hair joke didn't work again. Darn it. But anyway, you can see that there is a lot of opportunity for us to be able to take down some of these things that have developed over the years, to go back and re-examine whether or not they're really important, and remove those obstacles for people to be able to create jobs, be upwardly mobile, and to create opportunities here in our state. This is what Growing Nebraska is about, and this is how we can make Nebraska more effective, more efficient, and more customer-focused. That's what our goal for state government is. I want to thank all the senators who are participating in this. As I mentioned, it's going to be 8 different bills, so we have a variety of senators here in their different committees to be able to help us out and introduce these bills about creating opportunities for Nebraskans, so thank you all to the senators. And with that, we'll go ahead and want to thank also Nicole Fox from the Platt Institute as well for helping to pull all this together, get the people on board, and promote it. With that, we'll go ahead and open up to questions and answers, and as we typically do, we'll focus just on the occupational licensing, and if we have time left, we'll go on to other questions. Yes, Joanne. Go ahead. One of you. Ladies first, Grant, jeez.
I was just going to ask, you guys are very upstanding people in your
Well, I'll certainly let some of these folks come in and weigh in on this, but just in general, again, what we're thinking about is things where we have standards that are over and above what other states do. So what we've got is onerous requirements. We're not talking about getting rid of requirements in cases such as a massage therapist or the cosmetologist, but just bringing them back into line with what other parts of the market are. Some of them, though, are obsolete. Let's take the example of the car salesman, and Mickey, I'll ask you to talk about this as well, but if the state's not adding any value add here, if it's not a health or safety issue, why are we licensing it? If there's no value here, basically, as Mickey said, it's another tax. So let's let the car dealers hire the right people, and if the people aren't the right salesmen, maybe they need to find a different career and move on to a different job. But I think that's really what we're talking about here, is we're not looking to take away anybody's licenses where they're necessary, but just really put it more in line with what the market is saying based upon what the other states are doing.
I can address
Yeah,
that
please,
too.
Tina, step up.
There's ongoing.
Oh, come up here by the microphone.
Sorry. Once you are licensed, we have boards for all the licenses for healthcare, especially. We have continuing education that's required. Many jobs will still have supervision to some extent. Schools will still be teaching ethics, those sort of things. That is a grave concern. I've encountered those situations in my career. Everyone has, I think, at some point. So I haven't, as far as I know, there's no ethics compromise or anything like that. But it is something I would definitely welcome more conversation on. But I think there is some onerous and overzealous legislation that I don't think would necessarily compromise that.
And I think one of the key points I hit on too is for those individuals that are moving to Nebraska from another state, as long as their license in the other state is in good standing, we see no reason for them not to be able to obtain a license here. And most licenses too, you have to again, have continuing education. You have to fill out, information that there's been no violations or anything like that. So I think really, especially in terms of reciprocity, we have to remember we want people to have licenses in good standing to be able to practice in Nebraska as well.
On the automotive side, really, car sales is just presentation of a product and price, like jewelry sales or furniture sales or appliance sales. So there's really no difference. And what we found is in the malpractice of presenting a product properly, we just lose the customer. So it's in our best interest to have the very best employees, and that's what we endeavor to do.
Governor?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alona, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else?
Well, I just wanted to echo what you said, and that's the thing. We're not talking about eliminating any education or licensing whatsoever. When I transferred from Maryland, Iowa had to, I guess, vet me is the word. I submitted all my transcripts plus a background check and everything of the like, where there is, if someone is going to commit something inappropriate, there's a place that, there are reports and you're tagged. So it's about Nebraska being one of, I think, New York and Puerto Rico are the only other states that require 1,000 hours. So it's about meeting in the middle to still safeguard the consumer, for sure. What we do is very, very delicate. It's an intimate thing, and we want to keep that space safe and protected and offer, the best quality of treatment and so forth. So it's about meeting in the middle and removing things that don't make sense. Because, as I said, if I come from another state and you're needing 400 more hours, but in the meantime, you can work in Nebraska whilst you obtain those 400 hours, it doesn't make sense to me.
Michael, do you have anything to add?
Just real quick, and just hitting on that, I think that that would be weeded out by the annual inspections that you're required. Just speaking on behalf of my wife, they come in and inspect her annually to make sure everything is up to par and she's continuing on with her education. So everything is still being in compliance. It's not falling out because she didn't receive the correct amount of hours. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yeah, Fred.
Governor, what would be an example of interest group that has led to this onerous overregulation?
I don't know that so much an interest group. I don't have any personal experience, but I can imagine that over the years, something that may have seemed like it worked 10, 20 years ago just never was reexamined. And so that's what we really want to do, is go back and reexamine these and say, does it still make sense? Is it still in line with what other states are doing? So when it comes to reciprocity or the number of hours and so forth, I think it's really going back and examining, does it make sense for the here and now? We're really not trying to point fingers to anybody in the past. It's about, well, what does it take right now for us to get Nebraska to grow?
But you said that there were interest groups that had promoted this over regulation.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think it was actually certified.
Yeah, I mean, as far as my background in healthcare, I mean, a lot of times it's professional organizations. In my experience, a lot of times we see what I will call, a turf war, where it's, various professional organizations want to limit scope of practice to, their occupation only, and they don't want other healthcare professionals competing to be able to perform those same services.
Grant?
I'm assuming that all these changes bills are necessary because these are all state statute, correct?
That's correct. So that's, again, what we've got the senators here representing various different committees that they're going to be introducing these bills into to be able to make these changes. So yes, these will be statutory changes.
Okay, so is there anything you can do or will be doing administratively to get this, or is it purely all in statute?
So the things we're talking about here today are really in statute. So this is why we're working together to, the executive branch and the legislative branch to be able to address this, to be able to create opportunities for our citizens here. Joe?
In some states, advocates for reform have argued that it's also a barrier to convicted felons getting reintegrated into the workforce. Is there an element of that in any of these bills?
I don't.
Barriers for.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything with regard to that other than that if you were somebody who was coming out of our correction system and, say, wanted to become a cosmetologist, if you had the choice of doing it in Nebraska or, say, another state where the requirements are lower, you might move out to another state. So, again, we want to be in line with what the market is doing. For example, if it's standard across almost all the states to have 1,500 hours for that cosmetology degree, then there's nothing that prevents a school from teaching more than 1,500 hours, but the state of Nebraska is going to be in line with what other states are doing with regard to that.
It is a disqualifier on the automotive side. It is, yes. And it has become a bit of a hurdle for those folks that are trying to reintegrate into society. And,
So you're saying it was a disqualifier on getting the license.
It was.
And by doing away with the license, now somebody will not have to at least overcome that barrier.
So on the automotive sales side, it would be a disqualifier without the express written specific endorsement by the hiring company. So it could be overcome. It's just really extra steps in the process.
Thank you. Andrew.
You said there are 200 licenses right now, and about 20 that you guys are targeting to reform. What was your line in the sand? I guess which ones did you get behind, which ones you wanted to absolutely keep?
Well, as we looked at the different licenses, what we said is, what are some that just don't need to be, like the car sales license? There's just no benefit to the citizens of Nebraska to have this license, and it's basically, as Mr. Anderson said, it's just another tax. But also where the state of Nebraska was being more onerous than other states, whether it was with regard to reciprocity or the number of hours that was required. It was really trying to make us competitive with what other states require so that we don't put up barriers to people coming to our states and creating jobs, creating opportunities. So that was really what we looked at, was trying to find those areas where we were being too onerous to the state of Nebraska that it really wasn't benefiting the public.
And what do you tell those other businesses and other people that have gone through these extra steps to get those licenses, that now you kind of lower the lower the requirements, and they'll be able to compete against them. In the same, even though that they have gone through those extra steps and have worked their way up to meet those extra requirements.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about the industries in general, that they should look at this as an opportunity to be able to grow their industries by bringing more people in, bringing more people to the state. That's good for all of us here in Nebraska, and certainly to the extent that we are not in line with what's standard in other states, that's putting our state at a competitive disadvantage. So that's actually harming their industry's ability to grow.
Governor,
Two more questions.
the example of bus drivers needing something beyond.
School bus drivers, yeah. So school bus drivers already are required to get a CDL,
Right.
and that allows them to carry passengers, and then we require another permit on top of that.
Right, and what your DMV says about that is it requires them to pass a criminal background become certified and trained as a school bus driver, take a school bus driver written test and pass a driving test in a school bus. What's wrong with any of that?
Well, it's duplicative for having the CDL already that requires them to carry passengers. So if we're doing things that are duplicative, we want to just take out that extra step as unnecessary. So that's really what we're looking at in that one in particular. But in all of these licenses, if we're doing something that, for example, the audiologist is another great example. If you're already an audiologist and you're trained in helping people hear better, why do you need another license to be able to sell that equipment? If you're a school bus driver and you already have to get a CDL that allows you to carry passengers, so there's already training for that and a test you have to pass for that, why would you have to do another permit on top of that? So again, we're trying to find the areas where they're duplicative so that we can take out that extra step and make it more effective. And that's, again, this is part of the goal of the entire administration. Make government more effective, more efficient, more customer focused.
Any idea how much money we might lose from the licensing fees?
Off the top of my head, I don't know what the fiscal note on that. Aaron, do you know right offhand? It's certainly, yeah, it's not going to impact the general fund. It would be a cash fund issue. But I think the bigger point is that if it's not necessary, if it's not serving the people of Nebraska, we ought not to be doing it. Okay, one more question.
Can I ask you on a different subject?
Okay, so we're going to go on to the last question. It's going to be on a different subject. Again, thank you very much, folks. Very much appreciate the senators and all of our heroes here who are helping us with this. Very excited about this, looking forward to it. So thank you very much.